Thank you for joining me on the show today. This is the Now Talks, a collection of inspiring personal stories and leadership lessons from some of the world's most iconic leaders. It is the weekly podcast for women in leadership, brought to you by Nations of Women. My name is Dr. Tina Alton, and I'm your host for today and the coming weeks. So welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you have joined us from today. My name is Tina Alton. I am based in London, and I am the CEO and president here at Nations of Women, for those of you who don't know me. Today, I am delighted and honored to have with me Dr. Greg Wallace, all the way from California, United States, who has very kindly agreed to come and share some of his insights and really help us to understand leadership and how we can truly transform our communities, our nations, and our spheres of influence in this time. So just to tell you a little bit about Dr. Greg, he's been contributing to the success of organizations for more than 35 years. He's a multifaceted executive who's exercised leadership in a variety of roles: chief operating officer, director, chairman of the board, dean, in a variety of arenas, from civic to business to ministry, education, and non-for-profit. He leads the Wallace Group, which helps leaders in the marketplace to build focused and aligned organizations, as well as the KG Ministries, where he helps kingdom-minded leaders fulfill their mandate to advance kingdom culture in their sphere of influence. Greg has spent 25 years in corporate America. Most of them are set in California. Edison, America's second largest investor-owned electric utility. He began his career as a labor and employment lawyer and then performed a variety of leadership roles in the human resources, procurement, safety, training, and customer service operations arena. Greg regularly teaches, consults, and writes on leadership and organizational effectiveness issues. He's written 4 books, including a survival guide for change agents called Overcoming and Transforming: The Power of Leading from Identity. That sounds exciting. Greg holds a bachelor's degree from Cal State Northridge in political science, a master's degree from Azusa Pacific University in organizational development, a law degree from UCLA, and a doctorate in apostolic leadership from Wagner University. He's also completed the executive program in management at UCLA's Anderson School of Business. Greg has been married to his wife, Linda, for 25 years. Together, they parent a blended family of 4 children: Donovan, Judy, Tiffany, Justin, and 6 grandchildren: Kyle, Kayla, Talia, Cases, Asia, and Kaylin. Welcome again, Dr. Greg, to Nations of Women. We are thrilled and honored to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you again. So, I'm just astounded by what you've done, but just so our listeners and our readers can get a bit more flavor of who Dr. Greg is, would you just take a few moments and just introduce yourself by way of, what's been your journey as a leader, as a transformational change agent?
Yeah, I think my journey really is marked by variety, as you can tell from my bio, that I've had a lot of different experiences. Each one of them have contributed not only to my skill set as a leader, but also my outlook as a leader. And so, there are lots of definitions of leadership, but my variety of experiences has really taught me the leadership definition that I resonate most with is rooted and grounded in John Maxwell's definition, which is leadership is influence. But my variety of roles has also taught me that leadership is of 2 types. There's good leadership and there's bad leadership. And unfortunately, when we talk about leadership, we just sort of assume that leadership is good, which impacts how we view leadership. And so I think we need to be intentional about discussing good leadership versus just leadership. And so my definition of good leadership is influencing other people to produce good outcomes. And so that it recognizes that leadership is influence. that it's not about dictating. It's not about the exercise of power. It really, good leadership really flows out of influence.
That
And
is,
so yeah, go ahead.
that's amazing. I mean, I think straight away what I'm picking up here is oftentimes, I've experienced leaders coming from a perspective of, well, I've studied this, but you've made a really good point, as in leadership really it comes from, your skills, but also your outlook. I think the two go hand in hand. And so in your journey, I mean, 35 years as a leader, ooh, I'm only 27. um, I convinced myself in my mind that I'm 27. Nobody believes me, but my mind believes it. So, but really, I'd love to hear from you. What do you feel? What do you believe? Or what in your experience would you say as some of the key pillars of transformation? I know I've heard from you and I've seen from the work you do. And I think one of the key things that stands out for me time and time again in my experience of you is culture. And so would you just add, any other keys or pillars do you feel truly underpins leadership, but not just leadership that transforms?
The transformation occurs, unfortunately, over time. It's there's no quick fix to transformation. The experts will tell you that in terms of the corporate arena, that organizational change takes 5 to 7 years. that time used to be 3 to 5, but 5 to 7 years. And when you're talking about transformation occurring over time, then that really highlights the things that are truly important. So among those are the importance of a shared mindset. My go-to definition of culture is shared values, attitudes, and beliefs, with an emphasis on shared. And so it takes a while to get to shared, because very often we want to get to things very quickly. I was just having a conversation the other day with someone. We were talking about mission and the importance of mission. But very often we don't take the time to get to a common understanding of mission. We'll roll out a mission statement and we'll assume that we're all singing from the same hymn book. But in any group, you'll have a variety of different definitions of what the mission is. And so if you have a variety of different definitions around mission, then you're going to have a variety of different approaches, and you're going to have a variety of different results. And so key to transformation is getting to a commonly understood definition of what we're transforming into. What's the destination, and getting to that commonly understood definition. So mindset's very important.
Thank you for that. So, I mean, there is so many schools of thoughts on how we change our mindset. And I mean, I got to a point I was just fed up, to be honest. It's like how, I mean, change your mindset, this, but I also know without a shadow of doubt in my own work in life and, as a woman of faith, that transformation truly comes by transforming my mind, right? Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And so I think that just brings the message, it nails it on the head. You can't transform without your mindset being changed.
Yeah.
But what would you say, particularly as we look at, women leaders, and you've had the opportunity to lead, diverse groups, both women and men as well. What do you think creates the resistance to, the whole concept, like changing our mind? Because you'd hear somebody say, oh, yes, I've, this is it's in the past. And to link it to where you talked about shared values, shared, attitude, influence, resources, all of those things. But there is resistance where inside is like, oh man, I wish I could introduce that person. I could do it. But then we resist, we don't. And I find it's often laced in, well, I was hurt in the past, this, but in our mindset, well, I've dealt with that. This is gone, but then we're still in those tracks. So what as a leader with such a rich number of years of experience and expertise, what creates the resistance number one. And then to that, would you be able to share with us maybe two to three practical ways that we can break that cycle, break that limitation, break that, barrier that creates the resistance, so we can begin to step over to the other side and truly be transformational leaders?
So one of the barriers to transformation and change is our past or current success. So I've been successful at what I've been doing, and why should I change? And in my corporate experience, one of the largest change efforts involved changing a team of executives. So they had become executives. They had earned six-figure salaries, stock options, and bonuses. And so, why do I want it? If it's not broke, don't fix it. So, I've earned my place through doing it my way. And so now you're asking me to change. And in this particular case, it was asking people to change from being individual contributors to now being team players. And so that was a huge change. So their success, that was a roadblock. You're asking me to give up the things that made me successful.
Wow.
And then another roadblock that you touched on really is our sense of insecurity. Is change involves risk. And, I've tried risky behaviors before, and I've been punished. I don't want to do anything that causes me to lose my job or my standing or impact my performance appraisal, which then impacts my pay. So our own sense of insecurity can also hinder our willingness to embrace change.
Oh, this is hard. So I mean, it's like, it's the scale, right? Both sides of success, and I totally get it. It's like, you've been like exactly as you said, and then also on the other side of the scale, this sense of insecurity, even when that is because you did something good, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the first time, and then you're punished or reprimanded for it. So now you just don't. So
Right.
how then? I believe that how then, if we take the side where somebody's done, taking some risk, done good things, and then reprimand, that comes from the leadership at the top.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we change the outlook for those leaders at the top to be able to see beyond the fact that, hey, a junior leader or somebody who's not a VP or whatever is, I feel like sometimes maybe that happens again, to your very point, insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
So how then do we take out insecurity, as leaders? How do we, I mean, this is your baby. Bring us home.
So I learned a phrase years ago in a leadership seminar, and it really has served me well through literally the decades. And that is, people will only follow leaders they trust. They will only trust leaders they know. And so it really does start with relationship. And many times, I encounter people who have gone through leadership training, and they know how to get to know their team. So they learn everyone's names and birthdays, and there's a focus on getting to know the people, but they don't allow themselves to become known. And that's a missing piece. So people need to get to know you as well, so that they can trust you. So what I found is that in the group of executives before, we were asked by our boss to cross train. So we were leading each other's organizations, and so we were meeting monthly. And in the course of that, we began to get to know each other. We realized that each of us were pursuing our master's degrees at night, late in our careers, and that was our first point of connection. But as we got to know each other, then we began to trust each other. And for one of the things for me, I realized that I was seen more, I was a relative newcomer to this group, and I was seen more as the boss's representative as opposed to a peer. And so that created a lack of trust. But once I became a peer, then I became trusted. And once I became trusted and I trusted them, they let me into their world, I let them into my world, and we began to do things together. And so the initiatives that we began to follow weren't just our vice president's initiatives. We were creating our own initiatives. And so that leads to another key aspect of change and transformation is people tend to buy in more to the things that they help to create. If we force things on them, or so we hand them something to do, this is what transformation looks like, that's less effective than, you know what, why don't you help create what transformation looks like? Why don't you help create the path to get there? And so people become more invested in the things that they help to create. And so that's how I got this particular group, or this particular group came together to engage in change together and overcoming that initial resistance.
That is amazing. And really, I think I won't forgive I will forgive myself shortly thereafter. But I think this would be a complete disservice to our time today, and for what we're trying to bring within this now talks is that. And just quoting what you've written here is that, these days, I believe one of the most important roles of good leaders is to influence culture. And I think I know I responded back absolutely. Without changing, influence in culture, there really can't be any change, let alone think about transformation. And I've seen that, I've lived that when I was in Africa, growing up in Africa, even into my adulthood as a married woman, as a mom. Our culture back then had a huge impact and influenced me as I was developing as a leader. Even culture from my parents or my elders all impacted me. And I think culture is it's a very big, diverse, I would say umbrella. But if you can just bring us home, what exactly, how do we look out for, how do we know what aspect of culture, because some aspect of culture is actually quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Aspect of culture is good, and some not so good. So how do we then as leaders begin to identify? Is there identifiers that we can take from you in terms of, okay, this aspect of culture needs to be remolded, or we need to pivot, or needs to be changed or influenced? What's your advice on that?
Yeah, it starts with a sense of what I call intentionality. Going back to the example I used before, we had to make a huge cultural shift from individual contributors to team play. And so I noticed my boss was very good about being intentional to find opportunities for us to engage in team assignments. So he created he created 9 cross-functional initiatives. So there were initiatives that couldn't be completed unless we engaged in teamwork. We began to have offsites, and there was a mixture of fun and some work. But we were asked to sit at different tables to meet different people. And so, over time, as we got to know each other, we began to build relationship. He was just being intentional about doing things as a team. And actually, I'll share a painful one for me, where the middle managers, they were more embracing of the change than the directors at the time. And so, at an offsite, the vice president was asked who was leading the change. And so, of course, the middle managers they were hoping the answer would be Greg. And he said, no, it's all of the leaders together. And then there was more pushback, and it was like, well, but is Greg, I know it's a team, but is Greg the team captain? No. So, which of course, didn't help me with my peers at the time, but that was a way of sending the signal. This is team. And even, even if it's going to take us longer to get someplace, it was a way of reinforcing the value that this is team. So finding opportunities to reinforce your values, incorporating those values into your people practices. So that meant changing your performance appraisals were no longer about rewarding individual contribution. It was about rewarding team play, rewards and recognitions. What got recognized was around team. So bringing that sense of intentionality to everything that you do and aligning your practices in a way that supports the culture's values, attitudes, and beliefs. Because there are things that we do every day that if they're not aligned, they unintentionally undercut what you're trying to do with your culture. So, alignment, that sense of focus, reinforcing your values, all of those things go into what I call that sense of intentionality.
Oh, this is so good, Dr. Chris. We're going to have you back again, because I have heard you talk about how you transform a nation. I've heard you talk about that. We were in Southern America or somewhere in the Caribbean, and that stuck with me. There were pieces of that stuck with me till this day. And I would love to, as time permits in your busy schedule, anytime you can gift us a little bit of your time, I would love to have you back to just, focus on how do we transform a nation, or how do we transform a community, I think. So in our last, I think, yes, we've got like 63 and a half seconds left. What would you say your key insights? What can we learn from your life as a leader?
Wow. Again, trust yourself as a leader. My book, Transforming Leading from the Power of Identity, it speaks to the fact that, again, with a sense of intentionality, that the lessons that we've learned over time serve us well as leaders. Many of us spend a lot of time trying to learn leadership from consultants and from books. And what I found in living my own life are the lessons that I've learned from, my parents, from coaches, from teachers, school of hard knocks. Those are the things that I tend to remember that helped me as a leader. And so my counsel is, if you think about your own lessons learned, those are leadership principles that you've developed in your own life that you can use to your benefit as a leader.
Wow, that is so good. So I don't know who is listening right now, but I'm in to wrap up here. Dr. Greg has shared with us, leadership really is a variety, and that variety includes your skills, your outlook, your environment, your current situation, who's in your life, school of hard knocks, all of those things. There's always good leadership and bad leadership. So don't automatically assume that every leadership is good. And indeed, there's a leadership crisis globally. Leadership, as you mentioned, going back to the definition by John C. Maxwell, is that leadership is influence. So if you're a leader, you're ultimately going to influence. But what you influence and how you influence truly is what makes the mark. And be a leader that, as you're influencing others, it actually produces good outcomes, because influencing people that doesn't produce any good outcome is not leadership. And transformation takes time. If in doubt, take a look at a baby, right? Take a look at the baby and you would see that indeed transformation truly does take time. And leaders who are transformational or desiring to be transformative in your workplace, in your community, whether you're in government, whatever sphere of influence you're in, will not work unless you have a mindset of a shared mindset with emphasis on shared, where you're sharing your values, you're sharing your influence, you're sharing your resources. And also mission is very important, where you are able to create a common definition of what it is that we're transforming and where exactly are we going. Where those two components are not there, it creates a gap in your leadership. And some of the restrictions, the hesitations or things that really create resistance to leadership is either our current success or our past failures, which is all rooted in a sense of insecurity. And so we have to be aware of what is it that makes you feel insecure and work to come out of that place of insecurity so that you can be in your true, authentic self. And I love this one, that people only follow those they trust, and they will only trust the leaders they know. That is just incredible. And as a leader, you can't afford to be hiding. It's like lighting a light and hiding it under a bushel. Nobody puts a nice smelling candle under a table or under your bed. You put it out to create light, to create fragrance, right? And so as a leader, get comfortable being known, get comfortable putting yourself out there, but not just out there for the sake of out there, building credibility, building character to ensure that those that you're leading, those that you're influencing, get to know you for who you are and build that trust that is so required for leadership. And as a leader, don't just dump things on people. Be a leader that is open, inclusive, allow other people to contribute, allow other people to participate in what it is that needs to be transformed. And leadership is no leadership if we don't influence culture. Culture is good, culture can be bad. And to truly be a transformative leader that is transforming, whether your spirit influence culture, requires intentionality. So be intentional about teamwork, be intentional about reinforcing the good values, be intentional about rewarding, whether it's people, behavior, attitude, whatever it is, recognizing those that are contributing to what it is that you're doing. And be willing to create the right alliance, be willing to lock arms with others, and trust yourself as a leader, says Dr. Greg Wallace.
Yes.
You must trust yourself,
yes,
leader, and always remember that your life's lessons, think on your own life lessons and find the strength in that. With that, I thank you for everybody who's been listening or reading. These are phenomenal gold nuggets. Write to us now at nationsofwomen.com. Let us know, how are you applying these and what are the results that you're seeing? Or indeed, if you have any questions for Dr. Greg, send it to us and we will forward that and make sure we bring Dr. Greg and Wallace back again. But Dr. Greg, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I have not kept my word. I am reprimanded, but I thank you for the gift of your time. And we look forward to having you back again.
No, I enjoyed every single second of it, even the seconds that went over time.
Thank you. And that's all for this week. You've been listening to Dr. Tina Alton with the Now Talks, the weekly podcast for women in leadership, brought to you by Nations of Women. All that remains is for me to say, have a fantastic week, stay safe, and reach out if you need any help now at nationsofwomen.com. Until next time, enjoy the pursuit of your potential, and remember, now is your time.